This is Fred from North 40 Fly Shop, and we recently had a question from Mark in Great Falls wanting to know what the best fly lines are to use with fiberglass rods. So Jake and I came out this afternoon to a small stream, and we're going to try a couple lines and see if we can answer Mark's question. I can tell right away that I'm going to like this. I got the this little Echo glass 3-weight, 6 foot 9 inches, paired up with the Rio 3-weight light line. And man, it's fun. So we went out today and cast 3 different rods, and we also paired them up with 3 different fly lines. The first rod that we used was the Echo Glass 7, or actually it's a 6'9" 3-weight, and that rod was fantastic with the Rio light line. Just a perfect matchup. That would be a combination that I would use on any given day. The next one, we threw the Eagle Claw, which is also a 3-weight, and that one also worked very well with the Rio light line. Remarkably, that little Eagle Claw rod was relatively fast with that particular line. The casting stroke with that rod was almost the same as if I was throwing my normal 9 foot 5-weight Sage 1. It was really interesting. The other combination we used is we took a 5-weight 8-footer custom built, and on that one we threw the regular Rio Gold line, and that one worked beautifully, and then we put on a double taper. And for the small stream, I actually preferred the double taper. Felt really good on the rod, loaded it quick and easy, great control, roll casting, snake rolling, do whatever you want. So 3 great choices, 3 fun rods to fish. So we came out to a small stream this afternoon, and I tried a couple fly lines. I've got my impressions, but I'm going to turn it over to Simon Gawesworth with Rio and Tim Rajeff with Airflo.
My name is Simon Gawesworth. I'm the marketing manager, brand manager at Rio, a fly line company out of Idaho Falls, where I do a bit of the brand marketing and a lot of the product testing and designs, and fun on the water. Testing products is always the funnest part.
I've heard you're pretty techie when it comes to fly lines.
Fly lines have got that way, you know. It's the way fly lines are made. It's made it possible to do that, and that's why there's 30 different trout lines. When in the old days it was a weight forward or a double taper. So in some ways we are creating confusion by doing that, but yes, I'm techie about it. I really like fly lines. I'm kind of anal about it. You can take the finest rod you've ever had in your life and just put the wrong line on, and that thing's a dog. So the line is utterly important in getting it to load how you like it as an individual. There's no one fly line, sadly, because nobody has, or not everybody has the same casting stroke. If the world had the same rod, then you'd still have to have separate and different lines, because other people, one person is going to cast the line with a fast stroke, somebody's going to cast it with a slow stroke, somebody's going to fish a creek at 5 feet with 5 feet of line, somebody's going to fish a reservoir with 70 feet of line. So even if you had the one rod, you're still going to need a variety of fly lines because of those variables. Having said that, once you start to dial it in, there's certain things that are essential in a fly line and a fly rod in a combination. One of them is not overloading a line, and that's where the fiberglass questions come in, because they are slower rods and you really don't want to overload them with lines that are built heavier than the line standards. I think when you look for lines when you're fishing fiberglass rods, first of all, look for one that is a lighter than these heavy lines, something that is built to the industry standards, so you can have a bit more length out when you need to without overloading it. But secondly, most people, when they choose to buy a slower action rod, whether it's bamboo or the slow, deeper flexing graphite rods like a Sage Circa or something that's really soft, or a fiberglass rod, most of the anglers are going to be fishing smaller creeks, fishing 6, 8 feet, maybe to 25, maybe to 30 feet. Very few people are going to take a fiberglass rod and go out on the Missouri and an upstream wind on Craig Flats there and try and punch out a 40-foot cast. You're not going to do it. The rod isn't going to do it. So people choose rods more for fisheries than anything else, and those fisheries being shorter range casts. So the second part I would always look for in fly lines designed for rod actions like that are lines with fairly short front tapers. Because if you're only fishing 10 feet of line outside your rod, and let's say your line had a 10-foot front taper, you don't even have the mass of the fly line outside the rod when you start to make the cast. So it becomes very hard to load at short range. So I would look for a line that has a fairly short front taper. We make one line specifically for bamboo rods and softer action rods for fiberglass bamboo, sage circus and things like that. And it's called the light line. And one of the differences between the light line and the trout LT, which is a line called the LT, the light touch, is that the LT has a very long front taper of about 11 feet. Still a very lightweight fly line, nice presentation because of that taper. But it means if you're fishing at short range, you can't even get some mass to turn out and turn over the fly to deal with any bit of wind to load the rod. Whereas the light line has a 5-foot front taper. So once you've got 5 feet of line out, you're at the heaviest part of the fly line, so it loads up. So those are your considerations. So I generally look for a line with a short front taper, assuming that you're fishing smaller creeks. Completely different equation if you're fishing a big river. And generally you don't want to look for something that's too heavy, because again, you're going to have a lot of line outside the rod. That if you have a lot of line outside, you'll have a lot of weight and you will overload it.
Hey.
Back. So what can I do to make your day better right now?
Let's talk about some lines for some fiberglass rods.
Cool.
What do you recommend for lines for fiberglass? Uh-oh.
Well, I think for trout fishing, since glass rods have been around since the beginning of fly line development of synthetic lines, one of the things that I tell people is that there's some tradition involved in fiberglass rods, and so there's a push for people that own glass rods and bamboo rods, for that matter, to use double taper fly lines. Most of us don't even know have never used a double taper line. Have you? When's the last time you fished?
I know what it is, but I have not used one.
Yeah. What line do you use for your trout fishing? What style?
I think I just use a weight forward,
right.
Traditional kind of end all be all.
Perfect. Right. So weight forward lines. For the first, typically the average weight forward line being 40 feet long, the front of that line is almost what you would use with a glass rod. You're probably not too often trying to shoot 100 feet with a fiberglass fly rod, right? Mm-hmm. So the weight forward part isn't that critical, but backing up a step, one of the things that, let's back up even farther, that one of the things about fiberglass rods is that for most people, fiberglass rods generate a little less miles per hour than their graphite rod cousins. So the idea is if you have a graphite rod here and a fiberglass rod here and you cast them, fiberglass rods typically are heavier. Since the fibers are less stiff, to make them cast the same, the glass rod's heavier. So that means when it tries to recover and give miles per hour to your cast, it has to pull that fly line through the air and its own weight. Therefore, if you had a robot, if you were like my brother, the casting robot, and you had a graphite rod with 35 feet of line out, a fiberglass rod with 35 feet of line out, trout fishing, standard 5-weight, and you come forward, flick the graphite rod because it's lighter, not because it's stiffer. It gives you a little more line speed. So, how that translates into choosing the right line for your glass rods are typically, I recommend that people choose a line that's got either a little shorter front taper or a little thicker tip diameter, so that there's still enough energy left when that line's rolling through the air to straighten out your leader. With a graphite rod, if it's moving faster, you can use a longer taper and a little thinner tip diameter to have the line straighten out. I would say in general, you'd want a fly line that is not overly thin or hyper presentation. So that means a little more aggressive front taper, which means a little shorter front taper, and maybe perhaps one that finishes a little thicker at the tip. So that because the glass rods don't generate as much miles per hour, more or less, as a general statement. This way the line will have enough mass at the end to help straighten out your lead. You know, we fish because it's fun. You know, we're not solving world hunger here. We just do it because we love to fish. And when you think about how many casts you make in the day, if you can have more fun with your cast and more fun when you hook up, that would be good. So the glass rods, while they may not throw a 100-foot laser beam into the wind, the truth of the matter is, for most situations, we don't need to do that. So I just say, you know, if you have a friend that has a glass rod, or if you want to invest in a glass rod, you might just have more fun fishing than you ever had before.
We got lots of great information from Simon and Tim. Both agreed that it's really important to choose a rod or choose a line that's matched to the AFTM grain standards for the rod that you're using. In other words, match up a 3 for a 3 or a 5 for a 5. You definitely don't want a line that cheats toward the heavy side. It's also favorable to have a short front taper. I found that the double taper and the Rio light line were both spot on for the rods that I tried. In the process, I also rediscovered that little glass rods are really fun. Thanks for the question, Mark. Tight lines.
So that's it for episode 34 of the Ask North 40 show. Thanks for watching. Special thanks goes out to Simon Gawesworth with Rio and Tim Rajeff at Echo and Airflo. Check us out at north40flyshop.com.